it's really up to you on how successful you're going to be. And we hear that a lot, but it's true. And I think that because of the access of information now that we have, I think that, I mean, think about this. In my pocket is a computer that can tell me what's going on in China at any moment. And 100 years ago, if somebody passed away in your family and you weren't near them, you wouldn't hear about it until the mail got to you or somebody sent you a telegram, right? So
Right.
not only do we have access to information, but we process so much information that we get lost in that. And we forget that we are in control of our own success. And so, the words of wisdom are surround yourself with great people who believe in you. And they're going to tell you great things about you, and you're going to tell them great things about themselves, and then believe it and move in it. And the success will follow. It's interesting. When you do a good job and you do the right thing, the success and the money always come.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers. Today, our guest is Michael Caputa, Regional Vice President with Blackstone Elevator Consulting in Florida. Michael started his career with Thyssenkrupp Elevator as an account manager in Atlanta and has grown in several different roles and companies. Michael is an endurance athlete and has proven over and over the power of the mind over matter. Michael believes the best bet you can make is on yourself. He likes to say hard work beats talent. Stay humble, hustle, and never give up. This is part two. So for part two of this interview, I want to talk a little bit about business, do some business mentoring. And specifically, I want to ask you about, getting into the consulting business, because you're kind of new to that from what I understand. And what was it that motivated you to get into consulting?
Being in the industry now, I guess coming up on 16 years, I have seen and I've experienced so much. And it's come at a great cost for me personally, as a father, as a husband first, and a father of 4 kids, and recently now a grandparent. The the price that we pay to get to where we get it's a cost on us personally. And so as I continue to go through my career on the contracting side, I started to notice that personal side was starting to take a little bit of a hit, and I wasn't willing, ultimately at the end of the day, to let that take a hit. So
Right.
it was more of a personal decision than it was a professional decision. But obviously, my experience in the industry helped make the professional make up the difference for the professional part.
Right.
The other thing that I was starting to have a hard time reconciling as a contractor is, you could have all the desire and the intent in the world to want to do the best for the customer. And I think that the company does too. But
Right.
there is now, as a contractor, some red tape, just some things that can help, that can hinder you from being able to actually do that. And it could be things that are completely out of the contractor's hands. I'm not saying that the contractor's trying to not service the customer, but supply chain issues, lack of
Sure.
resources from labor, an industry that's constantly evolving. There's, the turnover in the industry is quite high in certain positions. And so you're, constantly having to deal with that.
Right.
And so it just became harder for me to reconcile, how am I going to be able to take care of the customer when I really don't have the power to do it? Like, I can only do so much, and I'm counting on so many other people to get that done. And I said, you know what, personally and professionally, I think it's time for a change. And quite frankly, all good salespeople are consulted, based salespeople.
Oh, yeah.
And
Sure.
so now you're just shifting gears from being on the contractor side to being an advocate for the end
Right.
user,
Right.
the customer.
Yeah. What would you
So,
say is the single biggest value you bring as a consultant?
I think the biggest value that I bring as a consultant is the fact that I've done it from the contractor side for so long. And I know the ins and outs of how the industry works from that perspective. Um, I know essentially when you deal with a building, you have a set of priorities and the contractor has a set of priorities. And so now I can bring that to the building and we can make a plan based off of the client's priorities and expectations and budget and try to get them the best value from bringing all of that experience that I have from the contractor side.
Right, right. Well, and you've probably seen some times where you feel like, wow, that's probably not totally fair to the customer. And so seeing that from the other side, you'll pick up on that pretty quick. No, it
Well,
doesn't feel
but it goes both ways too, right?
sure.
I think to be a successful consultant, you've got to be able to stand up to the customer and tell them that they're wrong too.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, obviously when you do the very best that you can at all
Mhm.
times, and sometimes it doesn't go the way that you thought it was going to go. And yes, I don't want to say that the on the contracting side that the customer was taken advantage of, but at the same time, you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And did you pay a little bit more than you should have? Maybe. Was there a different solution that could have got the same result that didn't cost as much? Maybe. Is there some terms within the contract that may be a little bit more favorable for the contractor than the end user? Maybe. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, but at the same time, I can stand in front of the customer and go, you know what? You're wrong. you
Sure.
know,
Sure.
ultimately the contractor had no idea that this was going to happen until they got in and started doing the work. And so yes, it's an additional charge to you and it's not wrong. Like
Right.
they
It's your
absolutely
equipment.
deserve
It
it.
needs to be fixed. I mean, if your transmission fails and you were in there for an oil change, well, guess what? You're buying a new transmission too.
Absolutely. I mean, you think of a good attorney or an insurance adjuster, they're able to know the industry just different, better than you. As a
Right.
building owner, how many other things do you have to deal with?
Right.
Property management, HVAC,
All
landscape.
of
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. And so, why not pay a small little premium to have somebody come in and advocate for you that knows the industry? So I think that's the
Right.
biggest value that I bring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Yeah. And so this is just my perspective, but it seems like consulting is a growing sector. Do you agree with that, or what do you see?
it's because I'm so new into consulting. Um, I don't necessarily know if it's growing.
Okay.
What I
Mhm.
can tell you though is that there are definitely opportunities as we continue to grow the industry for people to come along and to educate the end user that's not a contractor. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, you're always going to battle though at the end of the day. How do you make the the end user aware that the consulting is needed,
Right.
right? So, is it growing? Probably, but I think more than anything, or just like everything else, maybe just awareness of it is growing.
Mm.
As we look at LinkedIn and other social media platforms, and then just experiences word of mouth, customers going to consultants to have a better experience. I think that just people are becoming more aware.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So let me ask this question because I've always been a little intrigued. I mean, you obviously ran businesses. You've been on the small business side, and what kind of goes through my head is I guess the relationship from contractor to consultant to building owner or manager, or what does that look like from the like maybe a branch manager or something like that. Um, are consultants, are they your friend or the enemy? How have you received, I guess,
oh man,
experienced
that's
that?
a great question, and the answer is both. from
Okay.
from a branch manager or from a contractor perspective, um, I think most times it's the same that it is with any other industry. If there is a situation where the customer is not satisfied or is unhappy and they bring in a consultant, majority of the time it's a misunderstanding or a lack of communication.
Interesting. Okay.
And so from a contractor side, you get a little bit anxious about a consultant coming on board because we've all been, as contractors, subjected to consultants that were just so pro customer that you really felt like you couldn't win. And that's not my objective, or the objective of Blackstone is not that.
Sure. Right.
Our objective is to mend relationships. As a contractor, especially with the major elevator companies now, account managers have hundreds, if not thousands, of elevators that they are
Right.
responsible for.
Sure.
And to say that you're getting out to see all of these customers, it's impossible.
Sure.
But when a consultant comes on board, if I'm a contractor, I'm a branch manager now, I'm starting to say, you know what, we have an opportunity. Let's make the most of the opportunity. Let's mend the relationship. Let's fix what the problems are. And we can continue to keep that relationship moving forward, right? The consultant can actually help with that process.
Oh, absolutely.
And so as a contractor, I would just remind them that it's not a bad thing, ultimately to have somebody come in to help the business. And the sooner that we all get in partnership, the smoother that whole process is going to go.
Right. Right. Well, it's interesting to hear you say, it's a misunderstanding, or it's, there's, I guess, what are the, I don't know, I guess it depends on the size of the business, depends on a lot of things, how many customers you have. What are some things small businesses can do and or branches can do, those people in the branches to, I guess, to really keep the communication smooth?
Yeah, there's really that's the biggest challenge for every organization. It's going to be communication. There's really no magic wand. I think ultimately the best thing that you can do is just look for signs of frustration, or it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that if an elevator has been shut down for more than a couple of days and you haven't made the phone call to let the customer know, that should be, those are the things that
It's the bad news you need to
can
give 2 days ago.
Yeah, exactly. And spending the effort to get the information right. We live in an age where we're so used to the information coming to us,
Right.
that it's really hard for us, or it's difficult to get information sometimes, or we think it is. But spend the extra effort to figure out those different metrics that your KPIs are for your company, and you could probably mitigate a vast majority of customer concerns by just putting in the extra effort to understand them and find out what they are. Because like I had said earlier, the technology's there.
Yeah. So let's dig into that just a little bit. What would that look like? I mean, is that maybe I'm the account rep driving across town and actually visiting the elevator, visiting the customer? Is it more about calling the mechanics, or well, I'm just curious. What does that look like?
Yeah, I wish it was a cookie cutter, scenario where, but now, because of where we are in the 21st century, I think that your plan is you start off the day saying, I'm going to take care of the customer no matter what it takes. That's my plan. And so how do you execute that plan? Well, yeah, I want to be in front of their face, but it may not always work out that way. And if it's at very least a phone call, emails are so impersonal. I would never suggest delivering bad news via email. But if you can't get there face to face, you can make the phone call. But it doesn't mean that you can't rely on the mechanic, right? If you have a great relationship with the mechanic usually has a great relationship with the customer. And if you can leverage that as an opportunity to have the mechanic assist you with that customer experience, then do it. Know your audience, know the situation, because it's so situational. And to say that I had the best advice to do all the time, you just have to really you got to be mindful of what the situation is, and then what your resources are to engage.
Yeah.
But you always engage. You have to engage.
Right. And it'll be different every time, it sounds like. But if you're, know your what you have, right? Who's on your team, because it's very much a team effort, right? Maybe you have a mechanic, maybe
your service superintendent's got one of the most thankless jobs on the planet, and so just
Sure.
by taking 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day to check in with your superintendent, and maybe not even make it about work. Hey, Bob, how's the family doing? Hey,
Right.
when's that hunting trip coming up? Just to where you can connect, because guess what? When there's that relationship internally with the mechanic, the superintendent, the admins, they're going to be funneling you information just because they know that you are on their team.
Right. Right. You gotta prove that you care, right? Care about them as individuals, care about the team, care about the customer. Hey, I want to know, right? If something's
Yeah,
broken, I want to be in it.
I want to be in it. And honestly, I think when you look at the most successful people in our industry are the ones that love solving problems,
Sure.
because that's what we do. When the elevator is
Yeah.
running, it's supposed to.
Sure.
Right? So, broken elevator means you have an opportunity to solve a problem. So embrace it, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, communicate with all the
All the
stakeholders,
people.
and it'll go so much better than, it's not just a mechanical function that needs to be fixed, or electrical. It's the entire relationship, really.
Yeah. And also too, when you think about it from a perspective, you put yourself in the customer's shoes. I know that's kind of cliche. What I've realized is that unless you're dealing with the building owner, and even with the building owner, but more times with the property manager or the chief engineer, they have bosses and
Yeah.
they have tenants, and they're getting asked questions. And when we, as a provider, don't give answers, it goes back to, hey, no news is still news,
Right.
right? Just give them answers so that they look like they're doing what they're supposed to do in front of the people that are counting on them.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that. But yeah, if you got upset tenants, I mean, I'm, doctor's office on the second floor. Hey, we're out of business because nobody can get up to our office. I mean, that's intense.
Right.
And yeah, if you're the building manager and you've got no answers.
Yeah, it's a scary feeling, right? It's a
Yeah.
hopeless feeling. And I mean, you don't have, and then the other thing too is a lot of times I saw where people didn't want to engage because they didn't have a really good answer, or they didn't have all the answers.
Right.
But I don't think the customer wants you to have it solved immediately. I mean, they may want that, but they'll accept you giving them bits and pieces.
Sure.
What you
What you
can't
have is
do,
better than giving them nothing.
exactly, what you can't do is manipulate it or stretch it, or tell a white lie, because those things always come out. I
Oh, it's
used
gonna
to
blow
work
up
with a
in your
guy.
face when you say, "Oh yeah, tomorrow morning we'll be there." We got two crews showing up, and and then they don't show. Right. Great.
Yeah, it was never going to happen, right? Or UPS lost the part, and you didn't get order. Okay, well, send me the tracking number. Oh, yeah. So just, it's a lot better to say, I didn't order the part, but I'm going to order it overnight. We'll have it tomorrow. It's my fault. I'm sorry.
Very sorry.
Very sorry. So I think that's the approach when you think about being successful.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's a lot to think about, but obviously you've been at it long enough that you see all those pieces and all those parts. So that's very cool. Um, so one of the things I wanted to well, just curious, as you look at the industry, the changes, and we've talked a little bit about that. What would you see? What are some of the trends you see over the next 5, 10 years that could change some of the dynamics?
You know, I think that we still are trying to figure out our way out of the pandemic.
Okay.
We're still trying to figure out how we're going to find the resources that we need in order to take care of what's coming down the pipe.
Mhm.
And there's no labor tree. You can't just go out and get mechanics. And
Sure.
so I'm really expecting that you're going to see a focus on training, apprentice mechanics, and really going after getting more employees, because I think what really whacked us in the pandemic is we had an aging
Mm.
mechanic base, And then we had the pandemic. And so we kind of got hit on both ends of the spectrum. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we invest in the new generation of mechanics that are going to be coming up. And then
Right.
also too, I think that the strategy of, pivoting a little bit to being more of a concierge boutique service
Find that a little
industry.
bit for me. I like what you're saying, but help me
A lot
understand.
of times we just slap down a maintenance contract in front of a customer, and it's the same contract that we would give a 2-stop hydro as opposed to 3 15-stop elevators in a residential building. And if you can get them to sign it, great. But you really didn't define anything that they're going to get. You didn't differentiate yourself. You didn't really provide any value into, because a 2-stop hydro is a lot different than a building
Sure.
with 3 elevators and 15 stories. And so I think that, we need to be sensitive to that. Now I get it. A lot of times we want to make it the McDonald's model, right? We want to franchise this thing.
Drive through and boom,
It
boom, boom.
doesn't,
Yeah.
but it doesn't translate well in our industry. And I'll tell you why, because if you order a Big Mac in California and you order a Big Mac in Miami and you order a Big Mac in Atlanta, you're going to get the same Big Mac,
Sure.
right? But if I'm selling elevators or elevator service to somebody in California, somebody in Miami, somebody in Atlanta, somebody in Birmingham, it's all different. You have a different customer base, a different set of needs. And so it can't be as cookie cutter as we'd like it to be. And so it has to be centered around the needs of that market, that customer, that building, the way they use the equipment. A church is going to be a little bit different than a hospital in the way they
Right.
use their equipment. And so we
Sure.
got to be able to cater to that. And I think that we will see that shift. I think we'll see companies that will start to pay attention to, hey, how can I make this work for this customer?
Right. Right. Well, to your point, I mean, I'm sure that, yeah, some buildings don't use their elevators very much at all. Maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and then you got a hospital it never stops. I mean, it's 24/7. So, and I'm sure there are some out there, but I guess what I hear you saying is so, in other words, some people out there are seeing that, but I see you saying it's going to happen more. It needs to, um, we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, what you're seeing is, in certain markets, you have these independent companies that come in and they have that niche, right? They have a niche market where they're just really good at one aspect of the business.
Right.
And when I was coming up through the industry, we were seeing that with the majors. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was just this tells on me, but when I first got in the industry, you were seeing monthly visits with the majors, but still part of the standard offering. And as continuing, costs started to increase, they had to reduce visits. But we also know that elevators that are newly installed don't need as much maintenance. And so
Sure.
it was a balance, it's a balance. And then it goes back to, okay, well, if we're going to do this service delivery model as a major, are we locked into it? Are we locked into the service delivery model, or are we going to allow our team to pivot? Because the only way that we're going to continue to increase profits is by taking care of the customer and having
Right.
the residual income of our maintenance contracts not being canceled because we couldn't
Right.
deliver.
Yeah.
And so I do see a shift. I do see a shift of that coming back to the industry.
Very cool.
I
Yeah.
believe
Thanks
it needs
for,
to happen.
yeah. Yeah. And thank you for talking through that a little bit. So, we're about out of time, but as we wrap up, just curious, and maybe you've already answered it, but what are some words of wisdom you could share with, um, the industry? And I'd say that may have been what you just answered, but, what,
And I'm so humbled to even think that I would be able to have an opportunity that somebody would ask me to give words of wisdom. I think that ultimately, just going kind of piggybacking on some of the ideas that I had shared before, it's really up to you on how successful you're going to be. And we hear that a lot, but it's true. And I think that because of the access of information now that we have, I think that, I mean, think about this. in my pocket is a computer that can tell me what's going on in China at any moment. And 100 years ago, if somebody passed away in your family and you weren't near them, you wouldn't hear about it until the mail got to you or somebody sent you a telegram, right? So
Right.
not only do we have access to information, but we process so much information that we get lost in that. And we forget that we are in control of our own success. And so, the words of wisdom are surround yourself with great people who believe in you, and they're going to tell you great things about you, and you're going to tell them great things about themselves, and then believe it and move in it. And the success will follow. It's interesting. When you do a good job and you do the right thing, the success and the money always come. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
that's my humble words of wisdom.
Beautiful, beautiful, and well said. So thank you, Michael. I appreciate you being on the show today. It's been a lot of fun, and I wish you the best in your
Thank
new
you.
adventure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.